what's happening, YouTube? This is Clay with Clay's AC and Auto Repair and Clay Motion here in Grand Rapids, Michigan at Accurate Engines. Today we're working on a 2006-2007 Ford F150. This should be the same information from the 2004 to 2011, to my understanding. If this video is helpful, please consider subscribing, clicking the notifications, sharing my videos, and giving me them sweet old thumbs up. If you've got a question for me and I'm able to answer it, you're more than welcome to ask me on Clay's AC and Auto Repair on the Facebook Messenger. I'll certainly try to help everyone that I possibly can, and I'll always respond. Remember, if anyone else can do it, I promise you can do it too. And don't forget, Accurate Engines is the proud home of the Clayway Premium Plus engine, where you can actually get your own engine built by me and video of me doing it, so you're able to show your friends at them car shows. So even though I'm smiling on the outside, on the inside I'm frowning just a little bit, just like I'm sure you're doing at home right now. We're gonna tackle the job and show you a pretty easy way of doing this timing on these 5.4. As you can see, that we have everything that we're gonna need to accomplish this task. We have a new oil pump, even though I'm not installing that, a new water pump, all the timing and everything, tensioners, guides, etc., gaskets, some gasket making material, so forth and so on. We even have the cam tool, and I do have the cam follower tool. The part number for the cam holder tool is 567614. This is going to be detrimental to you being able to accomplish this job. Now, this is a cam follower tool, and what it does is it allows you to remove the cam followers, and there's a total of 6 of them, if I remember correctly, 6 to 8 that need to be removed. I'll put a little picture up here for you guys. It's not necessary to remove the cam followers, because what has happened over time was, when you're just changing the cam phasers, you need the cam followers removed to be able to do that. But in this situation, since we're changing the whole timing components, we don't need to do that. We are gonna have to move the crank just a little bit, but if we don't move it too much and we only just move it the little scotch that it needs to be moved, we'll be just fine. Now I went ahead and laid out the timing, the way that we're gonna install it on the vehicle. We've got a little dimple that goes between this right here, and it literally sits right in the middle of there. The passenger side, which is considered the right, is going to be the outermost timing chain. And the driver's side, which is considered the left, is going to be the innermost timing chain. When your cam phasers are seated in the proper position, you will notice that there's a little R and that the arrow points to the center of the timing marks. If yours does not have the timing marks, you will need to make a mark on them. Then there's the L. Both cam phasers will work on the right and the left, and they are marked accordingly. We also have new bolts, because these bolts are torqued to yield. Now, for some of those that don't have the proper tool, if I was going to hold this cam with a pair of vice grips, I would hold it in this location. And you should be able to find that location on both sides of the cam. But because this is a YouTube video and I don't want to seem like a hack, I'm not going to do it that way. If you're reading a book like mine, it's going to show you the steps for removing the cam followers and which ones to remove. The unfortunate part is this was actually done during the cam phaser installation phase if you're changing them. And over time, these books and manuals followed the Ford procedure, which does describe removing these cam followers. It's not necessary to remove the cam followers, because we're only going to move the crank a degree or two just to be able to put them in there. And we're not going to have any risk of bending the valves in that situation. Okay, so now we're going to inspect the timing before we remove it. And we need to make sure of a couple things. One, we're going to end up pulling this ring off of here. And when we pull this ring off of here, these little fingers need to point outward. So you can either mark the outside of this, or you can just make sure that when you go to reinstall it, that the fingers point outward. Now, the other thing that we need to ensure is that our cam phasers are pointed at the right direction. This is going to make sure that when we go to reinstall this, that these go in the proper position. On the passenger side, which is also allocated as the right side, the R is going to be pointed up. And on the left side, which is the driver's side, the L is going to be pointed up, just like the R on the other side. Now, if the L is pointed up on the passenger side, right, then we need to rotate the engine 180 degrees. Okay, another verifying thing that we can also look for to verify that our engine is at top dead center is going to be that our exhaust valve, which is the very first valve on cylinder number 1, is pointed at the 8 to 9 o'clock position, approximately. That's basically meaning that that lobe is pointed in this direction on that cylinder. Or to be more specific, pointed at the 930 position, like this. Now, if you need to move the engine at all, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to reinsert my harmonic balancer onto the tip of the keyway and move it the little bit I need to move it. Now I've just barely got it inserted, and that should give me enough to be able to move it by hand. You may have noticed that my R does not seem like it's in the center like my L is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this slack out of here by moving this cam. So when I insert my cam holder inside there, I'm able to hold that cam in the position where it needs to be without having to move it once it's disassembled. And I would also pay particular attention how this chain is tight, and this chain is tight as well, but this chain is loose, whereas in this part of the chain is pretty tight. Now my R is pointed approximately at the 1 o'clock position. Now it's not 100% necessary for everything to be lined up exactly, but getting it very close is going to be helpful when you go to reinstall the chains. Now we're going to remove the 4 10mm bolts that hold our timing chain tensioners on, removing the passenger side first and then the driver's side. Watch out, the passenger side sprung on me a little bit, but it was no big deal. Now we're going to remove the 2 8mm bolts that hold on our tensioner assembly. Mine's busted right here, or our guide assembly. And then there's one right up underneath here that we need to remove as well. Then that will allow us to move the whole guide out of the way. Then we will switch to the driver's side, doing the same thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and reinsert the bolts that came out of my tensioner guides like I always do, if I can keep them there until I put the new tensioner guides on. That way then I don't have to figure out where they go. Remembering that on the driver's side, the bolt is very short, and on the bottom of the driver's side, the bolt is longer. It's the opposite on the passenger side. Now we can go ahead and remove the chains, and if the chain seems to spring, like the cam moves, you don't have too much to worry about. Obviously you won't see this video if I bend the valves doing this, but this one sprung on me. Not a big deal. I'm not too worried about that actually, because I know I'm gonna move it when I go into there. And just like when I took that one off, this one sprung a little bit. Now we can go ahead and remove the crank gear, and note that the dimple points out towards the forward and the back is flat, the front is indexed. Before you disassemble anything, it is always good measure to take and put rags down open orifices. Then that way you don't drop any bolts or any parts down inside the oil pan or inside the engine, which you can forget about later and damage your engine severely. Now using 2 of the longer bolts from the front cover, These ones are the short ones, and these ones are the longer ones. We're going to install the cam phaser holder. Now, using my cam phaser holder, I'm going to use the front cover bolts to secure it down to the engine, holding the cam phaser so I can remove the 15mm bolts that are located in the center of the cam phaser. Now I'm going to remove the cam phasers themselves by gently wiggling them off until they come out. Now, while installing the cam phaser holder, it may be necessary to use the holder itself to pivot cam phaser to be able to locate the hole so you can put in both bolts. Both bolts do not have to be tight. They just need to be screwed in there a couple of turns to hold the cam phaser. Just like the passenger side, we're just going to wiggle this cam phaser until it comes off. This one was a little bit tougher to get off. Now that the gears are off of there, this is a good time to start cleaning up your mating surfaces, making sure that they are completely clean so your gasket seals when you go to reinstall it. And if you're like me and you're changing your solenoids, also a good time to remove them as well. When removing the debris and extra gasket materials from our mating surfaces, we want to pay particular attention to where the cylinder head meets the block and where the oil pan meets the cover. We want to take off the extra clumps of material from there and just pick them away with our fingers, because we don't want to use a razor blade like we did to scrape this extra off of here. Then that way we don't have any voids where our Permatex is going to be. We also want to make sure that when we reinstall our cover that we have extra Permatex in the mating surfaces here, here, down here, and on the reverse side where the head meets the block and where the front cover meets the oil pan cover gasket. Okay, so if we take a look down at our old cam phasers, we can actually see what the problem is. There's a pin that's supposed to come up through here and hold that spring, and that's 100% evident here on the new ones that got accidentally painted with paint, but not on the old ones. We can see the pin is either sheared off or it dropped back inside the cam phaser itself. So that's the reason that we're replacing the cam phasers and the chains. And also on top of that, mine on the passenger side had a busted guide. Now with everything cleaned up, we're going to install the driver's side cam phaser first, with the L pointing in the upwards position and the R pointing in the lower position. Installing the bolt, make sure we put a little bit of lubricant on the head of the bolt before installing it. Also make sure that the cam phaser locking pin is correctly inserted into the cam. If you don't do this properly and you don't torque it down properly, you may shear that pin off of there. We don't want to do that, or you could damage the cam. Lots of things can happen and they can be very bad. During the reinstallation of the cam phaser, we want to take it and rock it and push it back towards the vehicle, making sure that it is seated down up against the ring that is back here. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall our cam locking tool to lock the phaser down on the cam. Now, while installing my cam phaser locking tool, it was in the downward position and I had to pull it a little bit, which moved my cam phaser just a hair so I could get the hole to line up at the bottom. I installed this one first, making sure that it was meshed into my gear, and then installed the lower bolt. Now I'm going to turn on my torque wrench and I'm going to set it to 30 foot-pounds. There's two passes in this procedure. The first is 30 foot-pounds, then the next is 90 degrees. To ensure the accuracy of my first torque with my 30 foot-pound pass, I'm using the shortest socket that I have available, because if you use a deep well, it will throw off your tool. They are designed to use shallow sockets. Now for the folks that don't have a 90-degree foot-pound tool, we're gonna make a mark straight up and then make a mark straight out. And we're gonna make sure that this mark on the bolt head faces this one right here, and then the extra mark that I made faces downward. So we turn it only 90 degrees. Now setting my tool to 90 degrees, I'm gonna turn my bolt. Now that my bolt is set, I can remove my holder and repeat the same process for the other side. Now, once I've got my cam phaser on my right cylinder head here on the passenger side, I'm gonna turn it with my hand as much as I can to the location that it's supposed to be in, just to get it as close as possible so I avoid as little movement as possible when I'm reinstalling my timing chain. Okay, because mine moved to approximately the 1 o'clock position, or moved to the 3 o'clock, I need to move it to approximately the 1 o'clock. Really, it only matters where it's going to end up lining up with the two little marks on the teeth and in correlation to our 12 o'clock position on our crank. I'm going to install my new crank gear onto the crank just to make sure it moves on the crank freely. Now we're going to install the timing chain guides in this orientation that I have here. Now we're going to take and tighten down all 4 bolts that secure our timing chain guides down to 89 inch-pounds. Over tightening them can cause the bolts to break. Under tightening them can cause them to fall out. The right and the left timing chains are identical. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have these double links set in the right position. The L and the arrow should be pointed right between the 2 links, which it is. Yes, I did take off my crank sprocket. Then down here on the bottom, we're going to make sure our colored link is right on our dot where it should be, right there. And we're going to go ahead and move this down to the engine. Now I'm going to take my finger, and I'm about, from the back there, I'm about 1 tooth off. So if I rotate my cam the degrees I need, I should be able to put this chain on. Now I need to ensure that my chain is above my guide right here when I go to install this. And it should sit in there like that. And then the cam is going to push back against there because it's on the spring load. So now we have our L in the same mark. We have all of our tension right. Our chain is loose right here. So we know we're good there. Even though I'm certain that my timing marks are lined up because of the way that my chain is loose right here and tight on the other one, I'm going to double check them. Now I'm going to take and set my blue link to my little dot on the bottom of here and hold it with one finger. Then I'm going to take the other side and I'm going to get it as tight as possible, and I'm going to hold it up with the cam phaser end that's sticking up. One finger and rolling the chain up so it stays right there. I'm going to take my other finger and hang my chain up there as far as I can. And I'm going to ensure that it stays tight. I'm going to take both hands, run them up the phaser itself, and start to put the chain on. Now I know my links aren't going to be correct and I'm going to have to move my phaser. Now pulling my chain as tight as possible to the phaser itself, I'm going to begin to move the phaser, holding the chain away from the phaser. Oop, that ain't what we wanted right there.
I suppose it's not the greatest thing that the valve struck the piston, but when this vehicle starts up after I'm all done and it runs just fine, you'll know that it's not that big a deal. I turned the sound down because there's a whole lot of grunting. Setting this chain only took me a minute.
Now when our chain is installed properly, it should be really tight here and very loose down there. Now that we ensure that our R is between our links, we want to go down to the bottom and ensure that our blue link lines up to our dot correctly. If it doesn't, we need to reset it. Now at this point, we can take our chain and move it over the top of this pin and let it hang down just like that. Now once I've got that hung over the pin, my dot lines right up in the center, and I'm ready to put on the tensioners. Now we're going to insert the timing chain tensioner guides, and they basically pivot on the pins.
Now we need to install the timing chain tensioners. There's an R and an L located on the tensioners.
Now I'm going to put one bolt inside there, raise up on my tensioner because I need one hand to hold the camera. Notice how I install the top bolt first, and then I will pivot the tensioner to install the lower bolt next. Now we tighten down the 4 bolts that are holding our tensioner assemblies to 18 foot-pounds on each side. Okay, with our surfaces cleaned and everything ready to go back together, even though I've double checked myself, I'm gonna triple check my marks before I pull my grenade pins. And I don't normally repeat myself like this, but this is so imperative and so important, I think it's necessary for me to even do it too. Double checking your work when you're doing a crucial job like this is crucial. I realized that I had my timing chain tensioners on the wrong sides of the engine, so I corrected the problem. Now I'm going to go ahead and install my reluctor ring with my fingers pointing outward. And it simply sits on there and holds itself down. Now we can go ahead and pull our grenade pins on our tensioners, and we can push down on our guides. I always keep these just in case I need them in the future. And I'll pull up on this tensioner right here just to make sure that my tensioner springs up. Okay, so we don't necessarily need to do as much cleaning to this cover as we did the other side of the engine where it mates to, but we need to make sure that we put Permatex here, 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 and eventually we're going to end up putting it up here and cleaning off this surface here once we have it installed and we're ready to do our valve cover gaskets. Okay, just a tip for you folks out there that may not know. When you're installing these gaskets, do not take them and then run your finger down to install them. You will stretch the gasket as you do that. You want to make sure you put it in the proper place and push it down with your hand. Just pushing it down where it goes into the channel. Now the only advice that I'm going to give you before you put the cover on is make sure you use that Permatex in them locations that I spoke about. And if you want to stay and hear this sucker run or explode, you're more than welcome to. I won't post most of the video if it explodes.
Whoa, listen to that thing purr, man. That is awesome stuff right there.
So we got the Ford all put back together and it's running sweet as heck. It actually has a low idle, so we're going to clean out the throttle plate on this thing. But if this video was helpful, please consider subscribing, clicking the notifications, sharing my videos, and giving me them thumbs up. If you've got a question for me, you can hit me up on Clay's AC and Auto Repair on the Facebook Messenger. I'll certainly try to help. I can't help you with your baby mama drama, but I might be able to help you fix your car. And if you want to help us out down here, give them an email to accuratesteve@yahoo.com. Let him know that I helped you out, and they'll be on your mind the next time you need an engine. Even if I can't talk, I can still actually put engines together. God bless and have the best of days.